everybody, and welcome back to MFA Writers. We're so happy to have you here. It is officially summertime, and so today we have the final episode of Season 6 of the podcast. I just wanted to jump on and say thank you for another great season. I'm already looking forward to returning in a couple months with brand new episodes. In the meantime, we'll have some re-releases of our favorite episodes from previous seasons. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode and your summer. I can't wait to talk to you all again soon. You can find MFA Writers on Instagram and Twitter, as well as mfawriters.com. We love to hear from listeners, so feel free to shoot us a direct message on one of those platforms or an email at mfawriterspodcast@gmail.com. And if you have a minute to rate or review the show, the best place to do that is on Apple Podcasts. Doing so will help boost our podcast as we try to boost these amazing writers. Also, if you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, you can apply at mfawriters.com. On that same website, you can also click the support button to support us financially, if it's within your means. Or you can do so by going directly to buymeacoffee.com/mfawriters. Finally, as always, thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to MFA Writers, the podcast where we talk to creative writing MFA students about their program, their process, and a piece they're working on. I'm your host, Jared McCormick. Today I'm with Rey M. Rodríguez. Rey is a writer, advocate, and attorney in his second year of the MFA program at the Institute of American Indian Arts. He has also attended the Yale Writers Workshop and the Palabras de Pueblo workshop. He is currently working on a novel, and his book of poetry, Todos Somos Sagrados, All Are Sacred, just came out with Martillo Press. His poetry is published in Huizache, and his interviews and book reviews can be found in Bloga, Chapter Houses, Storyteller's Corner, Full Stop, Pleiades Magazine, and the Los Angeles Review. Today, Rey has brought a couple poems from his collection to read for us.
Thank you so much. I'm just blessed to be here. My first poem is going to be in Spanish. The title is Ver, Juzgar, Actuar. Hard work, always. Risky work, sometimes. Dangerous work, a veces. Where are the men? Were they too busy watching telenovelas? Were they too tired? The women knew. They wouldn't give the men cover either. Give a reasonable excuse for their absence. The answer surprised most. The women were unanimous. Son cobardes. Translation, they are cowards. The women did the seeing, the reflecting, the acting. At Comunidades de Base meetings, they knew the challenges facing the community, providing sanctuary for all migrants, cooking for the homeless, building a child care center, creating a career path for moms to become teachers or child care assistants, forcing politicians to do their job, providing desperately needed services to the community like security, sanitation, education. Hard work, always. Risky work, sometimes. Dangerous work, a veces. Organizing caminatas de paz every Friday, demanding peace in the neighborhood, confronting the police to stop harassing, brutalizing the children of Boyle Heights, to stop dropping off chamacos in rival gang territory to fend for themselves alone, unprotected in terror. Hard work, always. Risky work, sometimes. Dangerous work, a veces. Standing outside a funeral mass for a homie cut down way too soon as rival gang members circled the church. Facing off gang members lying in wait on street corners, ready to jump kids and teenagers trying to get to school. Taking guns and Uzis tucked beneath beds away from their sons, wrapping them in blankets, delivering them to a priest. These women knew how hard the work was, always. They knew how risky the work was. They knew how dangerous the work was, and they did it anyway. My second poem is entitled, There is a Garden Growing in Boyle Heights. There's a garden growing in Boyle Heights. It isn't filled with plants and flowers like bleeding hearts, devil's backbones, cupid's darts, angels' trumpets, fairy bells, lamb's ears, hens and chicks, earth stars, ghost pipes, moose tails, sneeze weeds, naked ladies, or sundews. No, instead it's filled with jardineros, meseras, carpinteros, plomeros, pintoras, soldadoras, trabajadoras de la construcción, cocineras. They nurture love in a place where few could imagine anything could grow. Come inside this garden, a garden of second chances, a garden with no borders, a garden where circle of compassion encompasses all, including those who choose not to enter. Come inside this garden of men, women, and children who, despite all odds, bloom. Some from the outside demonize this garden and the plants within, calling them vermin, poison, gang members, throwaway plants, invasive weeds. Instead of life-giving water, alcohol, fast foods, and drugs try to flood the garden. Lead and pollution poisoning as fertilizer threaten to sicken the garden. Missing books and a lack of resources in the schools threaten the children. From a distance of privilege and disgust, they watch the suffering, existing for no other reason than man-made poverty, government redline neighborhoods, a cradle-to-prison pipeline needing victims to fill its prison cells. In any other part of the city, gang members would have a different name. We would call them who they are, children. But the garden is strong, built on the shoulders of immigrant women. They know how to plant. They know how to nurture. They know that every person is divine. And in the garden, all who enter bloom.
Ray, that was great. Thanks so much for reading those. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's a real privilege. So thank you for what you do. And we really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. And the poems you just read from today are from your debut collection, Todos Somos Sagrados, All Are Sacred, which I believe came out today. So congratulations, first off.
Yeah, no, it's I think I applied for this in November. So your timing is amazing.
Well, how does it feel to have that book out in the world?
I can't. I mean, I've been with the organization for over 30 years. I've been, a board member with Proyecto Pastoral at Dolores Mission in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles, for over 30 years. And it's a little bit of a miracle. 2 years ago, because I had entered the MFA program, the executive director said, well, why don't you write a history of Proyecto Pastoral? And I thought about it. And at the time, I had been reading and writing a couple of poems. And when I thought about it, I said, well, what if we did a poetry book instead of a history book? And I thought it'd be more accessible. It's a bilingual book. It's in Spanish and English. Most of the community speaks Spanish, so they could share in it. And the poetry, I made sure there was kind of very clear and could show a light on the beauty of this community and the beauty of the women that organize this amazing place. And many of the founders were starting to pass, and so I got to interview some of them, and I really felt like this was a labor of love, something that I had to do. And for it to come together is really extraordinary because it's really a reflection of the work that the organization does, because it's really based on reciprocity. It's not a charity. It's one that sees anyone that comes at the door having equal worth and equal dignity as anyone who's offering services. So everyone is seen in their beauty. So it aligns with the title that everyone is sacred and everyone has something to offer, and we're happy to receive whatever anyone can give. And so the book, in a sense, has been that. The artist for the cover, Jose Ramirez, gave his artwork, and then Father Greg wrote a preface. He's written four books, and they're New York Times bestsellers. And Rachel Roman, she wrote a letter of introduction. And the translator, Javier Marrone, he gave his services in terms of helping to translate the the English into Spanish. So everybody is offered something very much consistent with what the organization, its values, what it believes in.
Well, the book sounds great. And I imagine another really exciting thing for you coming out now is the fact that you told me you didn't come to writing until later in life, right? You had a whole career as a lawyer before you turned your focus to writing and put this book out. So tell us a bit about the career that you had in law and how you ended up in writing after all these years.
Yeah, I mean, I still have it. I'm a lawyer at Disney, so I've been here for 30 years, and most of it came about because I was raising two kids, and they were like 7 and 9, and everybody was reading Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, and there was no inclusion really of Latinos in fantasy. So I kind of took to heart what Toni Morrison had said: is that if you don't see yourself in literature, then you should write it yourself. And so I started doing that probably a decade ago, and then during COVID, I found out about the Yale Writers Workshop, and I submitted 20 pages to it, and it got accepted. And I was thrilled. I didn't really think of myself as a writer. I don't know why, but so I went to the Yale Writers Workshop. Then I went there for 3 years. And when I was there, I met someone who had done a low residency program. I didn't know what a low residency program was. And she told me about it. And I started thinking about it in my fourth year of doing the Yale Writers Workshop. And the Institute of American Indian Arts is the premier program in the United States that supports contemporary indigenous art. And I wanted to be a part of that. My novel was going to uplift the story of the Maya. And so I was working on that project. And as part of that, they have these open mics in the program. And we had done a prompt that said, write a poem. And I'd written a poem. And I said, well, maybe I'll read this poem. And it just opened up a whole other world. And then I started seeing myself as a writer and a poet, like we all should.
I know that your mom was a big influence on you when it came to centering creativity in your life. I imagine in a career in law, there's not a lot of opportunity for poetry and creativity, but I'm curious to hear you talk about the influence your mother had on you to center that creativity in your life.
Yeah, I mean, what I've learned in writing my novel is that one should never give up their creative life, regardless of what they do. A creative life is essential to us. At least I would argue is as essential as breathing. And I think that's really what my mother taught me. She had a very difficult life, but she was an incredible artist. She was a calligrapher. She was a painter. She was a writer. She did origami. All of this was self-taught, and really an extraordinary person. And I realized what was interesting in, writing the novel, which is basically a love letter to her. It's a story within a story, and it tracks the Popol Vuh, which is the kind of creation story of the Maya. Maya is a very broad term, so there are different kind of groups within Maya, and each one will have their type of story. But the Popol Vuh, which is interesting, is that it tells the story generally that if you stop creating, in a sense, the universe collapses. And I think that's what kept my mom, I think, whole during very difficult times. And it was a very important lesson for me to learn that, especially now, later on in life, that the power of ensuring that you create something and that you give something back to the community, whatever that might be and however you may do it, is just so fundamental and so important, especially at a time when, you'll have certain groups thinking about what can I get? What can I take? And I think indigenous communities, people standing at the margins, understand that we need each other and that we must give in order to survive. Like we can't do this alone.
Well, I imagine the writing process is quite different when working on poetry versus working on a novel. I'm curious if you could tell us a bit about how those processes are different and how you think working on these different projects has influenced or improved the work in the others.
Oh yeah, it's really incredible how there's a synergy between the two. I think what's really powerful about a poem is that you'll have an idea, and it might take you think it's going to take you somewhere, and it takes you somewhere else. And there's this importance of really the each word. You focus on the word and you focus on how it sounds. So there are all of these things that you start thinking about that maybe you don't think so much about when you're writing prose. Maybe you think you have more time to tell a story. And so I think what poetry has taught me is to be very cognizant that each word does matter. Each word is important. Each letter, each idea. And so you start honoring, I think, the reader more in poetry. It teaches you a certain practice of doing that, and I think that translates very nicely to prose to ensure that anything that I am saying in the prose is important and is something that informs the reader, so that I'm not wasting their time or dishonoring them by putting in information that is not necessary to the story. And and I think it is a sacred act to write, and it's so beautiful to be acknowledged in your writing, and you want to ensure that you're not being disrespectful to the reader by trying to be more than you are. And I think what's really powerful about poetry is that it's so broad, and I think at its best, it's when you're able to capture something that's essential, able to capture something that is in a sense true. And that I think is what I'm trying to do in the novel, is to try to capture something that's true, and do it in prose.
And make that connection between history and the present, I'm sure.
Yes, and I think to a certain extent we think in a linear way, and I think what poetry trains us to do is to bring the past, the present, and the future together, so that we're not thinking in a linear way. It's this way of collapsing time and thinking about time in a very different way, and understanding that this moment is fleeting, and is sacred, and we need to honor each moment and honor each this gift of living.
Well, I'm really curious to hear how being in the MFA program has influenced you and your writing. So, the MFA in Creative Writing at the Institute of American Indian Arts is a 2-year low residency program with tracks in fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and screenwriting. The program includes in person residencies twice a year on the IAIA campus in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Tell us a little bit about what made you want to go back and get this MFA and why you decided that the IAIA program was right for you.
I only applied to IA, and the reason for that was that as I had examined other programs, I felt like I was going to have to explain myself, and I didn't want to be in an environment where I was going to have to explain myself and my stories and my ideas. And I wasn't supposed to go to IA. I had applied, and I got rejected. But because it was the only school I wanted to go to, and I really wanted to go to an MFA program, I wrote to the assistant dean, and I asked for a Zoom meeting, and I met with her. And she said, after we spoke, "Why don't you write an email to the dean, because you're right on the cusp, and see if you know see what could happen." So I did. I wrote a letter, and I told her exactly why I was so important to me, why I felt I had to attend there, and it was the only school that I was applying to. And 10 minutes later, after sending it, she came back and she said, "You're on the wait list." And I was like, wow. And then she said, "There's a good chance that someone's going to drop out and you'll have a spot." And I got a spot. So I entered the program with so much gratitude of being there. And so I had a very open heart. I mean, think of it, I'm 60, at the time I was 61. I'm getting into a program where, most of the kids are in their 20s or 30s. You know, what would they want to do with a 61-year-old in their class? And it was just beautiful. It's the type of community where I think people are very willing to build community. And so I felt like, you'll have writers' residencies where you have these extraordinary writers come in from all over. You have Arthur Z, the U.S. Poet Laureate. You had Ingrid Rojas Contreras, and you had M.S. Red Cherries. She won the American Book Award. The list goes on and on of extraordinary writers. Deborah Magpie Erling, and I can't really capture it with words, but Layli Long Soldier, read her, some of her poetry and gave craft talks, and they were so powerful because the idea is very similar to what I was learning at Proyecto Pastoral, is this idea of reciprocity. Like I don't think you can be a great writer unless you give, unless you're a good citizen in the writing community. So then I started interviewing. I was a editor for the Storytellers Corner, and I've interviewed over 40 writers. I've done 10 or 12 book reviews, and in each of those processes, I just realized that you must give back. And if you do, you'll get so much more in return in terms of just kindness and willingness of others to support you. And what I came to realize is that it was exactly the perfect fit for me to be in this writing community, because I'm very much of an extrovert. In general, I think writers and often indigenous communities are somewhat introverted or reserved, and so I think I was helpful in a certain way because I could help people kind of get out of their shells, and then I had to learn how to be quiet. I had to learn how to listen, and that's a great lesson. It was a great lesson in terms of slowing things down and just listening, but really listening, not just waiting to see if I could prove a point, but to really understand, because the indigenous communities have suffered so much, and there's so much grief, and yet there's so much joy. There's so much laughter. There's so much humor, and it's really an extraordinary environment to become a better person.
Well, those in-person residencies that you mentioned, they occur twice a year, and they include workshops, classes, lectures, panels, readings, film screenings, and individual conferences. Like most low-res programs, these in-person residencies are often the best time to try to build community in a program. So I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit about that, some of your standout moments from the residencies, and what it was like to build community in this program.
So part of it is I stayed in the dorms with the kids. I mean, I call them kids because they're 30 years younger than I am. But that was probably the best thing that I could do. I think I'm very kid-like. I don't think I've grown up yet. So, that was really wonderful. We'd have, long conversations late into the night. So that was very enriching outside of the lectures and outside of the workshops and different events. So that would be one place where I really learned quite a bit because I knew so little, right? And I was angry that I knew so little about kind of the indigenous experience in this country, and to get an education in humility and understanding, and really what we need to do to repair, what we need to do in terms of like ensuring that you know um, we create a better world, and how do we do this all together? How do we do this in a way that promotes sovereignty for indigenous cultures, and also the need for us to build community as a way of ensuring that we heal the past, acknowledge the past, build a world that is more just, and build one that's actually is one in which it is somewhat of a garden where everyone can grow and everyone is nurtured. And so I think for me, the teachers were really great. They really care about the students. The students themselves are, everybody was sharing kind of like, hey, here's a residency maybe you want to apply to, or here's a scholarship, or there's a constant uplifting of each other that is kind of the world that I want to live in.
Well, at the end of each residency, students are matched with a faculty mentor who then works one-on-one with them for the 16-week online semester. What does that remote work involve, and what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I worked with 4 mentors. That was great. Jamie Figueroa, MS Red Cherries, Kelly Jo Ford, and Pam Houston. 4 extraordinary writers. They have a tremendous amount of experience. They're great at teaching students. They're very interested in the work. So the way it works is you have to turn in 4 packets, creative packets during the semester. So generally, you're meeting once a month. You're working on your materials, and then you have to do, you have to read at least 8 to 12 books, and then you have to annotate them, or you have to write a summary or craft paper on each one of them. And then so we would meet, and then you could either talk for hours with your mentor, or you could just talk about what you're working on in terms of your creative package, the direction and so forth. I think since I had a fairly clear idea of what I was working on, and I knew I needed to finish my novel, so all of that was somewhat helpful already. So I was already in a fairly good spot there. Each one is a little bit different. Sometimes we would build community within the semester by having some of their other students we would read a book, and then we would come together on Zoom and talk about it there. There are also programs like AWP where we would meet, during the semester, and like I had 4 or 5 people at my house, and because AWP was in Los Angeles, so that was another almost a mini residency where we got to, there were various of the students that were presenting, so we went to hear them speak, and there were offsites, and we would do different things there. So that was another way of building community during the semester. The other thing that was helpful is being on the literary journal, because we have to put out a winter issue and a summer issue. So those that are on the literary journal, we have to work together. So there's also need to get together on that. For some students, I think it was a bit isolating doing it, during the semesters, just because you might be way out there. But as soon as people started feeling isolated, they knew they could get on a WhatsApp, and they could get on some sort of text messaging, and reaching out to people, and people would come together there. Um, I think it's a very good program for someone that has to continue to work, and yet they want to get an MFA. The flexibility of it is really good. The downside to it is that, yeah, it can get a little bit isolating, just because depending on where you are. But there were some people that lived in Santa Fe, so they would get together, they would write their work together. So everybody started figuring out ways of kind of building their own community and helping each other out.
Well, I want to hear more about that online literary journal, Chapter House, which is published through the MFA program. What can you tell us about your role on that literary journal and other roles that are available to students if they're interested in pursuing them?
I, got to meet Tommy Orange, and I got to meet Kaveh Akbar and Percival Everett, and Ingrid Rojas Contreras, and MS Red Cherries was the first one. And it was interesting because with her, I got to interview her the day that her book was releasing, kind of like this. But she was on a Brooklyn stoop, waiting for a Lyft ride to take her to the airport to pick up her mother. So I basically had 45 minutes to interview her. And it's one of the most incredible interviews. of the 40 that I've done, and it's the first one. And what is really cool about it is that she's, sitting on her stoop, and then she gets on the lift, and then we're talking in the lift, and then at the end of it, I get to meet her mom. So I could see it all on because she's doing it on her phone. And it was really cool because her book is entitled Mother, and she has a biological mother and an adopted mother, and the book is really extraordinary. And she was so happy with that interview that was the only interview she did for her book. And so Chapter House is a very special place. I think Storyteller Corner is a very special place because it has a group of authors that ordinarily I don't think get their due, but are extraordinary. And the interviews are long; they're at least an hour, and they're interviews that you can kind of sit with. Luis Rodríguez, Octavio Quintanilla, um, Reina Grande, a lot of indigenous, Chicano, black, immigrant, um, Arthur Z is on there, and then we have Balam Rodrigo, who's this extraordinary Mexican poet who I got introduced by Pam Houston, and he's written over 50 poetry books in Mexico. And I did the interview in Spanish, and then I translated it into English. So it's kind of like there's a Spanish and an English version of it on the site. So, and I think because the Institute of American Indian Arts is such a unique school that we were able to get these great writers to speak to us because they knew that it was a place that would honor them, and it was a place that they knew that whatever message they wanted to convey, that their message would be honored. So it's really been great, and now there's a university press that's interested in compiling all the interviews and putting it in a book. So I'm kind of working on that project. It's been one of the joys of my life to participate in this, as well as I wrote reviews, and in the reviews that was really helpful to really understand these very complex, very difficult poetry books. I could interview the artist or the poet, and then I could think about their work in that light, and that was really helpful to start getting insight into how expansive and how powerful poetry can be. And it's what inspired me to do Todos Somos Sagrados, because I realized that poetry is something that I feel if we uplift it, it can really be an important avenue for change, which is surprising because you don't really expect that.
So your role on the magazine, you were in charge of interviews and reviews. What other roles are available to students on that magazine?
So there's the editor in chief, there's the assistant editor, and then there are editors of nonfiction, fiction, and poetry, and then we have an editor for the arts. So I'm both the editor. I guess I'm called the features editor right now, and also I was the nonfiction editor. So those are the different areas that you could do it, and that's where you read slush piles, and you are able to see kind of like what people are thinking out there, what they're writing, what is writing that's appropriate for our literary journal, and it gives you insight into like when you start submitting what you think it should be, what should be a good literary journal for you to submit to, because every literary journal will have its take, and I think you need to be understanding of exactly what they're looking for. Otherwise, in a sense, you're kind of wasting your time just submitting to a journal that you don't really know.
Well, as with most low residency programs, students in the MFA at the Institute of American Indian Arts are not fully funded. The school's website has a detailed breakdown of the tuition fees for anyone who is interested. But do you know if there are any scholarships or funding opportunities through the program?
Oh yeah, if you're indigenous, that's kind of like one of the few things that they do that, and the tuition is relatively low compared to other schools. So it is much more affordable than other schools. So I would really encourage anyone who's indigenous to apply to the school. I would encourage anyone really that feels like their interests align with the values of the school to apply. It is definitely a program that is open to many different voices, and it is getting more and more competitive. So I think it is important to apply. If you don't get in the first time, keep applying to the school. But I would say if you are interested in a school, you should apply, and then there are plenty of resources to help you get financing or to get scholarships to cover the costs.
Also, I feel like I have to mention before we wrap up that the current presidential administration has tried repeatedly to defund the Institute of American Indian Arts. Luckily, they failed to do so to this point. But what can you tell us about how people within the program and the school are holding up in the face of this threat?
Yeah, I think it's really criminal. It's not. I think I know. By law, the U.S. government has a responsibility to ensure that it protects institutions like the Institution of American Indian Arts, funds them. Indeed, it should be overfunding them. The criminality of the past in terms of what has been done to indigenous people is really shameful. And the history of boarding schools and the impact that it had on hundreds of thousands of children and communities, families, the brutality of it, the attempt to erase entire cultures, languages, all this wisdom that has been lost. We should just all be shame. We feel this level of shame that we can't even imagine that there would be a federal government that would even consider not funding this school. So, from my perspective, it's really one of the really shameful acts of this administration to not live up to its responsibilities and to ensure that indigenous people are given the dignity and honor and respect that they rightly deserve. And in addition to that, we have so much to learn from indigenous communities, especially at a time when the earth is getting warmer and we're in need of nurturing and taking care of this planet. I feel like there are such important lessons to be learned. And what I do know is that indigenous people have faced this before. This is not new. And there's a level of resistance, resilience, and joy that is unstoppable and can never be eliminated. And regardless of what happens, and I'm confident that we will do what is right, and we will fund this. This happened last year. It's happened in the past. I think ultimately, the Trump administration's budget proposal is only a proposal, and it still needs to go through Congress. And in Congress, there's enough support, but nothing is guaranteed. So I would just hope that your audience and those that are hearing would do their best to write to their Congress people and to their senators and ensure that this institution, which I consider very sacred, is supported and is something that we uplift in a way that meets our obligations and our responsibilities. It's something that is very important, I think, for just our humanity.
Well, Ray, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your time. Before we go, I have one last question for you that I ask all my guests. What is one way in which the MFA experience has been different, for better or for worse, from your expectations when applying?
I did not expect to be wrapped in the type of kindness and love that I felt there. I did not expect that. Like it's hard to put in words, especially because there's such an attack on marginalized people, indigenous people, people of color at this moment, Latinos in general, with the ICE raids and everything like that. And yet to find a place like this that shows that the world can do better. It's an expression of really how powerful tradition and culture and ideas of our requirements to take care of each other, flourish. And so it was such a privilege to be part of the community. I know I'm still part of the community. It's something that these were lifelong friendships that were created. And I know if there's any chance that I can help out an IAI alum, that I will do that.
Well, this seems like just the kind of place we should all be supporting right now. I'm really happy that you found it. And I'm also really happy for you that your poetry collection, Todos Somos Sagrados, All Are Sacred, is out today with El Martillo Press. So I encourage our listeners to go grab a copy. Thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me.
Thank you so much.